I still remember the exact second my life split in two. I was standing in the center of that bright, expensive living room, watching my own father introduce strangers as his family while I stood there like I didn't belong. Richard Carter's voice carried across the room, calm and proud. "Everyone, this is my family." My chest tightened as I followed his gesture. Vanessa Carter stood beside him, perfectly composed, her smile soft but sharp enough to cut. Dylan Carter leaned against the wall, arms crossed, looking straight at me with open amusement. I waited. I actually waited for my name to come next. It didn't. The silence around me grew louder than anything he had said. "So that's it." I finally spoke, my voice steady but burning underneath. "You just skip me like I don't exist?" My father turned his head toward me, slow and controlled. No shock. No guilt. Just distance. "I've moved on, Jason." That one line didn't feel like words. It felt like something breaking inside my chest. I let out a breath that didn't sound like mine. Moved on. I stepped forward, unable to stop myself. From what? Being my father? Vanessa's eyes flickered toward me, irritation replacing that polished smile. "You should calm down," she cut in softly as if she owned the space already. "This isn't the time for drama." I looked at her, really looked this time, and something inside me hardened. "You don't get to decide what this is," I replied. Dylan pushed himself off the wall, stepping closer with a lazy confidence that made my jaw tighten. "You're embarrassing yourself," he muttered, glancing at me like I was something beneath him. "This place isn't yours anymore." I turned fully toward him, my voice dropping. "Say that again." The room shifted. Even the air felt tense. But before anything could escalate, my father stepped in. Not to defend me. Not to stop him. Just to end me. "That's enough." His tone was firm, final. I looked at him, searching for something human. "Anything. You need to leave." For a moment, everything went quiet in my head. "Leave?" The word came out slower than I expected. "You're serious?" He didn't rush to answer. He didn't even look uncomfortable. He just stood there like this was a business decision. "This situation isn't working," he replied, each word clean and distant. "It's better if you move out." I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten. "Better for who?" I asked. Vanessa let out a small sigh, like she was tired of dealing with me. "For everyone," she added, her tone calm but cold. I shook my head slowly, disbelief turning into something heavier. "Everyone?" I repeated. "Or just the version of your life where I don't exist?" Dylan let out a short laugh under his breath. "You're still acting like a kid," he said, shaking his head. I stepped closer to him, my voice low but sharp. "You have no idea what I've been through in this house." He didn't flinch. "Yeah," he replied, almost amused. "And now you're done here." I turned back to my father again one last time. "Are you even listening to what they're saying?" I asked. He didn't respond. He didn't defend me. He didn't deny it. He just stood there, silent, which somehow felt worse than anything else. That silence told me everything. Emily Ross stepped forward then, her fingers brushing my arm gently. "Jason, please," she whispered, her voice shaky. "Let's just talk about this outside." I pulled my arm away without looking at her. "Talk." I echoed, my voice quieter now but colder. "What exactly is there left to talk about?" She hesitated, and that hesitation hit me harder than anything else in the room. I finally turned to her, searching her face. Something was off. Something distant. "You're not even on my side, are you?" I asked. Her lips parted, but no words came out. That was enough. I looked back at my father, my chest rising and falling slower now, like I was already shutting down. "You're really choosing them over me?" I asked, this time without anger. Just truth. He didn't blink. He didn't look away. "Yes." No pause. No wait. Just a clean answer. I nodded once, even though it felt like my chest was collapsing inward. "All right," I murmured, more to myself than anyone else. I turned and walked upstairs without another word. No one followed. No one called my name. My room looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. I packed quickly, not because I wanted to leave fast, but because staying even a second longer felt unbearable. Every object I touched felt like a memory being erased. When I came back down, they were still there, standing exactly where I had left them, like I had already been removed from the scene. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. Vanessa's voice followed me, soft and controlled. "Take care of yourself, Jason." I didn't respond. I didn't even slow down. I stepped outside into the night, the air colder than I expected. The door closed behind me with a quiet click that sounded louder than everything that had just happened. I stood there for a second, staring into nothing, letting it all hit me at once. The betrayal. The rejection. The truth I couldn't ignore anymore. My hands tightened around the strap of my bag. That house wasn't my home anymore. That man wasn't my father anymore. And as I took my first step away from it all, I felt something shift deep inside me. Not weakness. Not fear. Something sharper. Something colder. That night, I didn't just lose everything. I became someone else. The first night in that apartment felt louder than anything I had ever experienced. Not because of noise, but because of silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank wall, trying to understand how everything collapsed so fast. "This is it now," I muttered under my breath. No response. No movement. Just me. The same words kept repeating in my head over and over like they were burned into me. "You're not part of my life anymore." I pressed my palms against my face and exhaled slowly. "How did it get this bad?" I whispered. The room didn't answer, but the memory did. That living room. That look in his eyes. That calm, final tone. I lay back, staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. It didn't even try. The next morning didn't feel like a fresh start. It felt like a continuation of the same weight. I was sitting on the floor when Mark Sullivan knocked on the door. "You alive in there?" he called out. I got up and opened it. He stepped inside, looking around the small apartment with a tight expression. "Damn," he muttered. "This is rough." I let out a quiet breath. "Yeah, I noticed." He looked at me, then shook his head. "You could have told me earlier. I would have helped." I leaned against the wall. Would it have changed anything? He didn't answer right away. "No," he admitted. "But you wouldn't be alone in this." I gave a small nod. "I'm not alone," I said, though it didn't feel true. He watched me closely. "You don't sound convinced." I didn't respond. Instead, I walked past him and grabbed a bottle of water. "I'll figure it out," I added. "I always do." Mark folded his arms. "You're not fine, Jason. Stop pretending." I looked at him then. "I'm not pretending," I replied quietly. "I just don't have another option." Days passed, but they didn't feel like days. They felt like one long stretch of emptiness. Mark kept showing up, bringing food, checking on me, trying to pull me out of whatever I had fallen into. "You need to get out of this place," he said one evening. "Just for a few hours." I shook my head. "Not in the mood." He sighed. "You're never in the mood anymore." I looked down at my hands. "Maybe that's the point." He stepped closer. "No, the point is you're letting this destroy you." That hit harder than I expected. "It already did," I replied. He stared at me, frustrated. "So what now? You just stay like this?" I didn't answer right away. "I don't know," I admitted. Everything I thought was real, wasn't. Mark's expression softened slightly. "Then build something real," he said. I let out a small breath. "Easier said than done." He shrugged. "Still better than doing nothing." Emily Ross didn't come around much during those days. At first, I told myself she was just busy. Then I stopped lying to myself. The messages became shorter. The calls became rare. When we did talk, it felt forced. One evening, I finally asked her to come over. She arrived late, standing by the door like she didn't want to step inside. "Hey," she said quietly. I nodded. "Come in." She hesitated before walking in, her eyes scanning the room. "You been okay?" she asked. I let out a small laugh. "Do I look okay?" She didn't respond. That silence felt familiar. I leaned against the table. "Something's off," I said. "Just say it." She crossed her arms slightly, avoiding my eyes. "Nothing's off," she replied. I tilted my head. "Then look at me and say that." She didn't. Instead, she stared at the floor. That was enough. "Are you still with me?" I asked. The question came out steady, but inside, everything felt unstable. She froze for a second. Then she inhaled slowly. "Jason, it's complicated." I felt something inside me drop. "It's not," I said quietly. "It's really not." She looked up at me then, but her eyes didn't carry the same warmth anymore. "Things changed," she said. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I noticed." I stepped closer, my voice calm but heavy. "So just say it clearly." She hesitated again. That hesitation said everything I needed to know. I stepped back, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "You don't have to explain," I added. "I already get it." She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. I walked past her and picked up my phone, scrolling without really seeing anything. "You've been seeing him, haven't you?" I asked. Silence. I looked up. "Dylan." Her eyes widened slightly. That was confirmation. I nodded once. "All right." She stepped forward quickly. It's not what you think. I raised my hand to stop her. Don't, I said. Just don't. The room felt smaller suddenly. I lost my father, I continued quietly. And now this. She looked like she wanted to say something meaningful, but it didn't matter anymore. Nothing she said could fix what was already broken. After she left, I stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door. No anger. No shouting. Just silence. The kind that settles deep and doesn't leave. I walked back to the bed and sat down slowly. Of course, I muttered. Of course it had to be him. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Everything started to make sense in a way I didn't want it to. The distance. The hesitation. The timing. I let out a quiet breath. I didn't see it, I said to myself. I didn't see any of it. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself. I had trusted blindly. Believed without question. And now I was paying for it. I sat there for a while, letting the weight settle fully this time. Then I straightened slightly, my expression changing without me forcing it. No more, I whispered. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. I stood up, grabbed my jacket and looked at the door. I'm done being the one who gets left behind. My voice was calm now. Steady. That pain was still there, but it wasn't controlling me anymore. That was the moment everything shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. And this time, I was paying attention. I didn't expect to find anything that day. I was just going through an old box I had dragged from my father's house, sitting on the floor of my apartment with papers scattered around me. Old photos. Receipts. Random things that didn't matter anymore. Why did I even bring this stuff? I muttered, flipping through another stack. Then my hand stopped. A sealed envelope. Different from the rest. Clean. Untouched. My name wasn't on it, but something about it felt important. I picked it up slowly. What were you hiding? I whispered, turning it over. My chest tightened as I opened it. Inside were letters. Legal documents. Official stamps. My breath slowed. This isn't normal, I said under my breath, scanning the first page. My mother's name was everywhere. Grace Miller. Over and over again. I leaned back against the wall, reading faster now, trying to connect everything. No way, the words slipped out before I could stop them. Numbers. Contracts. Ownership details. None of it made sense at first. Then it started to. Slowly. Piece by piece. This can't be right, I whispered. I grabbed my phone and searched for the name mentioned in one of the documents. Daniel Brooks. A lawyer. Still active. Still working. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. If this is real, I stood up quickly, grabbing my jacket. I need answers. My voice felt different. Not broken. Focused. I didn't waste time. Within an hour, I was standing outside a clean office building, staring at the name on the glass door. Daniel Brooks, attorney at law. The office was quiet when I stepped inside. A receptionist looked up. Do you have an appointment? She asked. I shook my head. No, but I need to see Daniel Brooks. It's important. She hesitated, then glanced at something on her screen. Your name? I took a breath. Jason Carter. She froze for just a second, then nodded slowly. Please wait. That reaction didn't go unnoticed. A few minutes later, a man stepped out from the hallway. Mid-40s. Calm expression. Sharp eyes. Jason? He asked. I nodded. Yeah. He studied me for a moment, then gestured toward his office. Come in. I followed him inside, my grip tightening on the documents. He closed the door behind us. I was wondering when you'd show up, he said quietly. I frowned. You were expecting me? He gave a small nod. Eventually. I placed the papers on his desk. Then explain this, I said, my voice steady but firm. He glanced at the documents, then leaned back slightly. You found them sooner than I thought. My patience thinned. What does that mean? He looked at me directly. It means your mother made sure you would find them one day. I stared at him. Why? He folded his hands. Because she knew the truth wouldn't stay hidden forever. I shook my head slowly. Stop speaking in circles. Just tell me what this is. He studied me for a moment, then exhaled. Your mother wasn't just your father's wife, he said. She was his foundation. My jaw tightened. What does that even mean? His voice remained calm. It means everything your father built started with her. I felt my chest tighten again. No, I said quietly. That's not possible. He didn't argue. He just reached for another file and opened it. Take a look. I stepped closer, my eyes scanning the documents. My hands went still. These numbers, I whispered. These companies, he nodded slightly. Registered under her name first, he explained. Transferred later under conditions. I looked up at him. Conditions. He met my gaze. Conditions that were never fully met. My mind raced. So you're saying, I couldn't finish the sentence. He did it for me. Most of what your father controls was never truly his. The room felt smaller suddenly. Then why does he act like it is? I asked. Daniel's expression didn't change. Because no one challenged it. I stepped back, running a hand through my hair. And me? I asked. Where do I fit in this? He looked at me carefully. You're her son. I let out a dry breath. That doesn't mean anything. His eyes sharpened slightly. Legally, it means everything. I froze. What? He leaned forward. A portion of those assets was always meant to pass to you. My heart skipped. You're serious? He nodded once. Completely. I turned away, trying to process everything. So all this time, I muttered. He threw me out of something that wasn't even fully his. Daniel didn't interrupt. He let me think. I clenched my jaw. Does he know? I asked. Not fully, Daniel replied. He knows pieces, not the whole truth. I let out a slow breath, my mind finally settling into something sharper. Clear. And now I know everything, I said quietly. He nodded. Yes. I looked back at the documents, then at him. What do I do with this? I asked. He didn't hesitate. That depends on who you want to be. I held his gaze for a moment, then looked down again. The anger was still there. The betrayal. The pain. But now there was something else mixed in. Something stronger. I'm done being powerless, I said. My voice didn't shake this time. It didn't crack. It stayed steady. Good, Daniel replied. Because for the first time, you're not. I picked up the documents slowly, feeling the weight of them in my hands. Not just paper. Not just truth. Power. Real power. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. I didn't go back after learning the truth. I didn't call my father. I didn't confront anyone. I just sat in my apartment, staring at the documents, letting everything settle inside me. Revenge won't fix this, I muttered quietly. The words felt strange, but they were true. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I picked up my phone and called Mark Sullivan. I need help, I said the moment he answered. There was a short pause. That's new, Mark replied. What kind of help? I exhaled slowly. I need to rebuild everything. Another pause, longer this time. All right, he said finally. Then we start from zero. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. No shortcuts, I added. No mistakes. His tone shifted slightly. Then you're serious. I looked at the documents again. I have to be. A few days later, Mark introduced me to Olivia Hayes. The moment I walked into her office, I could feel the difference. Calm. Controlled. Sure. She didn't waste time. So you're the one with potential, Olivia said, studying me carefully. I didn't react. That depends, I replied. On what? Her eyebrow lifted slightly. On whether potential means anything without results. A faint smile appeared on her face. Good answer. She leaned back in her chair. Tell me what you want. I didn't hesitate. Control, I said. Over my life. Over my future. She watched me closely, then nodded once. That's a dangerous goal, she said. Why? I asked. Because people who want control usually don't stop halfway. I met her gaze. I'm not planning to. Silence filled the room for a second. Then she smiled slightly. All right, she said. Let's see what you're made of. The training didn't start easy. It wasn't supposed to. Olivia Hayes didn't believe in comfort. Discipline first, Olivia said during our first session. Everything else comes later. I nodded even though my body already felt drained. Again, Olivia instructed. I repeated the task without arguing. Hours turned into long days. Days into weeks. Mark checked in sometimes, watching quietly. You're pushing yourself too hard, Mark said one evening. I shook my head. Not hard enough. He frowned slightly. You're not the same person anymore. I looked at him. That's the point. Olivia walked in at that moment. Good, she said simply. Change means progress. I straightened my posture. Then I'm on the right track. She gave a small nod. You are, but you're still incomplete. Months passed, but I stopped counting them. Time didn't matter anymore. Progress did. Every day I learned something new. Business strategies. Negotiation. Control over emotions. Never react first, Olivia reminded me during a meeting simulation. Let the other person expose themselves. I followed her advice carefully. Good, she said afterward. You're learning. I let out a slow breath. I'm trying. She stepped closer, her eyes sharp. Trying isn't enough. I held her gaze. Then I'll do more than try. She watched me for a moment, then spoke quietly. You're not broken, Jason. I didn't respond. She continued, you're unfinished. That line stayed with me longer than anything else. Not broken. Just incomplete. I repeated those words to myself every night. It became a reminder. A direction. By the time a year passed, I was no longer the same person who walked out of that house. My voice was steady. My mind was sharp. My emotions were controlled. You've changed, Mark said one day, watching me closely. I gave a small nod. I had to. He leaned against the wall. Do you ever think about going back? I looked out the window. Every day. He raised an eyebrow. Then what's stopping you? I turned toward him slowly. I'm not ready yet. He crossed his arms. And when you are? I picked up my jacket without hesitation. Then everything changes. A few more months passed. More deals. More training. More control. Olivia finally stood in front of me one day and nodded. Now you're ready, she said. I didn't smile. I didn't react. I just felt it. Come. Certain. I grabbed my keys and looked toward the door. Los Angeles, I said quietly. Mark smirked slightly. About time. I stepped forward, my voice steady and clear. This time. I'm not going back as the same person. The first time I walked into his office again, I didn't feel anything. No anger. No hesitation. Just control. The receptionist looked at me politely. Do you have an appointment? She asked. I gave a calm nod. Jason Carter. Meeting with Victor Langston. She checked her screen, then smiled. Go right in. I stepped forward, my posture straight, my expression steady. The doors opened and there he was. Richard Carter. Standing near the window talking to someone. He turned slightly, his eyes passing over me without stopping. No reaction. No recognition. I kept walking. You must be Jason, Victor Langston said, stepping forward with a confident smile. I shook his hand firmly. Good to finally meet you. My father looked at me again, this time with interest, but still nothing deeper. That moment, it settled something inside me. He didn't know me anymore. And that made everything easier. We sat down at the table, and the meeting started like any other business discussion. Numbers. Plans. Strategy. Your proposal is impressive, Victor said, leaning back slightly. I gave a small nod. It's only the beginning. Richard crossed his arms, watching me carefully. You're new, he said. But you're moving fast. I met his gaze without hesitation. Speed matters in this industry. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Confidence too. I allowed a faint smile. That comes with results. Victor chuckled softly. I like him, he said. Straight to the point. I stayed calm, focused. There's no reason to waste time. Richard studied me a bit longer, like he was trying to play something he couldn't quite understand. But he didn't push further. Not yet. After the meeting, I walked through the hallway with Victor. You handled that well, Victor said. Most people get nervous around Richard. I kept my tone even. I don't get nervous easily. He smiled. Good. You'll need that. We stopped near the elevators. We'll move forward with the partnership, he added. I nodded once. That works for me. As I stepped inside the elevator, the doors began to close, but not before I saw her. Vanessa Carter. Standing at the end of the hallway watching me. Her expression wasn't calm. It wasn't confident. It was uneasy. Like something about me didn't sit right with her. Our eyes met for a brief second. I didn't react. The doors closed. Good, I thought quietly. You should feel that. The next few weeks moved quickly. Meetings. Contracts. New deals. Every step I took was calculated. Every decision had a purpose. Mark called me one night. You're really doing this, he said. You're inside now. I leaned back in my chair. Yeah. He paused. And? I let out a slow breath. He still doesn't know. Mark gave a short laugh. That's insane. I looked at the documents in front of me. It's necessary. He grew serious again. Just don't lose yourself in this. I didn't respond right away. I won't, I said finally. But even as I said it, I knew something had already changed. I wasn't the same person anymore. And I wasn't going back. Dylan Carter noticed me sooner than I expected. I saw it in the way he watched me during meetings. The way his posture shifted slightly when I spoke. One afternoon he approached me directly. "You've been making some bold moves," he said, his tone controlled. I looked at him calmly. "That's how business works." He gave a tight smile. "Or how people get themselves into trouble." I tilted my head slightly. "Are you warning me?" He stepped closer. "I'm observing you." I met his gaze without backing down. "Then observe carefully." His expression hardened just a bit. "You're interfering with things you don't understand." I didn't flinch. "I understand enough." He held my gaze for a moment longer, then stepped back. "We'll see how long that confidence lasts." I watched him walk away, my expression unchanged. Not long, I thought quietly. Just long enough. Richard started paying attention after that. Small questions at first. Casual conversations. "You've been closing a lot of deals," he said one evening. I nodded slightly. "That's the goal." He leaned against the desk. "You remind me of someone," he added. I felt the words hit, but I didn't react. "Do I?" I asked calmly. He studied me for a second, then shook his head. "No," he said. "Just a thought." I gave a small nod. "Maybe it's just the work." He didn't push further, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes now. It was growing. Slowly. Exactly how I wanted it. Every deal I secured shifted the balance. Every contract I signed took something from him, piece by piece. He didn't notice it all at once. That was the point. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was quiet. Precise. Controlled. Victor trusted me more with each passing day. "You're becoming essential," he told me. I kept my expression neutral. "I just do what needs to be done." He smiled. "That's why you're valuable." I nodded slightly, but my focus stayed elsewhere. On Richard. On his empire. On the cracks starting to form beneath the surface. One evening, I stood alone in my office looking out at the city lights. My reflection stared back at me from the glass. Calm. Focused. Unfamiliar. "You've come a long way," I said quietly to myself. The boy who walked out of that house was gone. Replaced by someone sharper. Colder. Stronger. I picked up a file from my desk and flipped it open. Another deal. Another move. Another step forward. I closed it slowly, my mind clear. "This is just the beginning," I whispered. And the best part? He still didn't know. The man standing across from him every day, the one slowly taking everything apart, was the son he chose to forget. The room was full when I walked in. Investors, executives, partners, everyone that mattered to Richard Carter's world. I adjusted my suit slightly and stepped forward, my expression calm, my mind clear. Victor Langston caught my eye and gave a small nod. "Ready?" Victor asked quietly. I returned the nod. "Always." The presentation had already started, numbers moving across the screen, voices blending into one steady rhythm. Richard stood at the front, confident, controlled, exactly how he always was. For a moment I just watched him. "This ends today," I told myself. My chest felt steady, not heavy like before. No hesitation. No doubt. Just clarity. Victor stepped back slightly. "Jason has something to add," Victor announced. All eyes shifted toward me. That was the moment. I stepped forward. "I'll keep this simple," I said, my voice steady and clear. The room quieted instantly. Richard looked at me, curious at first. "Go ahead," he said. I met his eyes, holding that moment for just a second longer. Then I spoke. "My name is Jason Carter." Silence. It hit the room like a shockwave. I didn't look away. I didn't blink. I just stood there. Vanessa Carter's face froze instantly, the confidence gone in a second. Dylan Carter's posture shifted, his usual arrogance replaced with something else. Confusion. Fear. Richard didn't react right away. His eyes stayed on me, searching, trying to understand. "What did you say?" he asked quietly. I repeated it without changing my tone. "Jason Carter." The weight of that name settled into the room. "You're lying," Dylan said quickly, stepping forward. I glanced at him briefly. "No," I replied calmly. "I'm not." Vanessa's expression tightened. "This is some kind of trick," she said, but her voice lacked certainty. I reached into my briefcase and placed the documents on the table. "Then let's remove the doubt." The papers slid across the surface, stopping right in front of Richard. "Legal records," I continued. "Ownership details. Everything tied to Grace Miller." The room stayed silent as Richard slowly looked down. His hand moved toward the documents, but it didn't feel steady anymore. "This isn't," he started, but the words didn't finish. I stepped closer. It is, I said. Everything you built started with her. I watched his face carefully. The shift was there. Small at first, then undeniable. That's not true, Vanessa said sharply. I turned toward her. It is, I repeated. And you knew parts of it. She didn't answer. That silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. Dylan shook his head. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You expect people to believe this? I didn't raise my voice. I don't expect anything, I replied. I'm just showing the truth. Victor stepped forward slightly. The documents have already been verified, Victor said calmly. That was it. The final push. The room shifted again. Conversation started in low tones. Eyes moved from me to Richard, then back again. The control he once had over the room was slipping. Slowly. Publicly. Richard finally looked up at me. His face had changed. The confidence was gone. Replaced with something heavier. Something real. You, he started, his voice quieter now. You planned this. I held his gaze without hesitation. For a second I saw it clearly. Not the businessman. Not the man everyone respected. Just a father who had made a choice. A choice that led to this moment. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. You did. The room went completely still again. I stepped closer, my voice calm but firm. The day you chose them over me, I added. Every word landed exactly where it needed to. Vanessa took a step back, her expression no longer controlled. Dylan looked between us, his confidence gone completely now. This doesn't change anything, Dylan said, but his voice lacked strength. I didn't even look at him this time. My focus stayed on Richard. It changes everything, I said quietly. Richard's eyes dropped to the documents again. His hand finally touched them, but there was no control in that movement anymore. Just wait. Just consequence. Why now? He asked, almost to himself. I answered without hesitation. Because I'm not the same person you threw out. My voice stayed calm. No anger. No emotion breaking through. Just truth. The room didn't belong to him anymore. Not in that moment. The power had shifted. Everyone could feel it. Investors whispered. Partners exchanged looks. Victor stood silently, watching everything unfold exactly as planned. I took a small step back, giving the moment space to breathe. Richard didn't look at me again right away. He stayed focused on the papers like he was trying to hold on to something that was already gone. This can't be undone, he said quietly. I nodded once. No, I replied. It can't. That was the reality of it. No going back. No fixing it. I turned slightly, preparing to walk away, but I paused for one last second. I looked at him again. Not as a son. Not anymore. Just as someone who finally understood the truth. You had everything, I said calmly. And you chose wrong. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. I walked forward, past the table, past the silence, past everything that used to define me. This time I wasn't leaving empty. This time, I was the one in control. The first thing I noticed wasn't the headlines. It was the silence. The kind that spreads after everything collapses. I stood in my office looking at the city, phone buzzing nonstop on the desk behind me. Calls. Messages. Updates. Mark Sullivan's name flashed again. I picked up. It's done, Mark said. I leaned against the window. Yeah, I replied quietly. It is. He exhaled on the other end. Richard lost the board this morning. Investors pulled out. It's all falling apart. I closed my eyes for a second. And him? I asked. Mark didn't hesitate. He's finished. I didn't feel anything when I heard that. No satisfaction. No relief. Just calm. Later that day I saw it for myself. Richard Carter sitting alone in what used to be his office. No assistants. No calls. Just silence. I stepped inside slowly. He looked up, his face tired, older than I remembered. You came, he said. I didn't move closer. I had to see it, I replied. He gave a weak nod. You took everything. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. The truth did. He looked down at his hands. I built that life, he muttered. I crossed my arms. No, I corrected calmly. You used someone else's to build it. He didn't argue. He didn't have anything left to argue with. Vanessa Carter didn't stay long after everything came out. I heard about it before I saw it. Then one afternoon I passed her outside the building. She stopped when she saw me. Jason, she said softly. I looked at her without emotion. It's over, she added. I nodded once. It was always going to be. She hesitated. I didn't know everything, she said. I didn't respond right away. You knew enough, I replied finally. Her eyes dropped. No defense. No excuses. Just silence. That was all she had left. I walked past her without stopping. There was nothing else to say. Dylan Carter didn't face it at all. He disappeared before the final collapse. No statements. No fights. Just gone. Mark mentioned it casually. He left the city, Mark told me. I gave a small nod. Makes sense. Mark looked at me carefully. You don't care? I thought about it for a second. Not anymore, I answered. And it was true. The anger I used to carry, it wasn't there anymore. It didn't need to be. Emily Ross showed up a week later. I didn't expect it, but I wasn't surprised either. She stood outside my office, hesitant, like she didn't belong there anymore. I stepped out to meet her. Jason, Emily said, her voice softer than before. I kept my expression neutral. Why are you here? She looked down, then back at me. I made a mistake, she said. I didn't respond. She took a step closer. I didn't understand what I was losing. I let out a slow breath. Now you do. I asked. She nodded slightly. Yes. I studied her for a moment. The same face, the same voice, but it didn't feel the same anymore. Nothing did. I don't hate you, I said finally. She looked up quickly, hope flashing in her eyes. Then I finished the sentence. I just don't need you. The hope disappeared just as fast. She stood there, silent, like she was waiting for something else. But there was nothing else. That's it? She asked quietly. I nodded once. That's it. She swallowed, then stepped back slowly. I understand, she said, though her voice didn't sound sure. I didn't stop her when she turned around. I didn't call her name. I just watched her leave, feeling nothing. That was my closure. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just clear. A few days later, I drove out of the city. The road was quiet, the air different. I stood in front of the grave, hands in my pockets, looking down at the name. Grace Miller. For a moment, I didn't speak. I just stood there, letting everything settle. I did it, I whispered finally. The words came out softer than I expected. Everything you left behind. I protected it. The wind moved slightly, brushing past me. I let out a slow breath. But it wasn't just about that, I added. It wasn't about him. I shook my head slightly. Not anymore. I crouched down, placing a hand against the cold stone. I thought winning meant taking everything back, I said quietly. But it doesn't feel like that. I looked at the name again, my voice steady. It feels like I finally understand who I am. That was the truth I didn't expect. This wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It was about growth. About becoming someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I stood up slowly, my chest feeling lighter than it had in years. Mark called as I walked back to the car. Where are you? Mark asked. I glanced back one last time. Somewhere I needed to be, I replied. He laughed softly. You sound different. I opened the car door. I am different. He paused. So what now? I looked ahead, my voice calm. Now I move forward. No hesitation. No doubt. I didn't win because Richard Carter lost everything. I didn't win because people finally saw the truth. I won because I found myself again. And this time, no one could take that away from me.